No one expected the richest man in the world to be dragged into court like a common citizen. But that's exactly what happened when Elon Musk stepped into the courtroom under the sharp, commanding gaze of Judge Roberts. The air buzzed with tension. Media cameras flashed from outside the courthouse. Protesters and supporters had gathered around the building, their voices clashing in a chaotic echo of chants and slogans. But inside the courtroom, all eyes were locked on one man, Musk. The courtroom itself felt like the stage of a thriller movie. Reporters typed rapidly on laptops, every keystroke trying to keep up with the weight of what was unfolding. The court officers stood firm, and in the middle of it all sat Judge Roberts, stern, focused, and visibly unimpressed. He was known in legal circles for his zero-tolerance approach, especially toward those he believed were manipulating the system or behaving above the law. Elon Musk, for all his fame and wealth, would be no exception. As Musk entered, there was no smirk or playful tweet this time. He looked composed, serious, and uncharacteristically subdued. Dressed in a tailored Navy suit, he quietly nodded at his legal team before taking his seat at the defense table. Cameras weren't allowed in the room, but the tension was so thick you could feel it through the walls. This wasn't about a business deal gone wrong or some regulatory fine. No, this was about accountability at the highest level. Judge Roberts had called Musk to answer for allegations that many believed would change how billionaires are treated in the eyes of justice. The charges, though still under heavy scrutiny, had to do with the alleged misuse of market influence, misleading public investors, and claims that crossed an immoral territory, not just legal. The court clerk announced the beginning of proceedings, and Judge Roberts leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Mr. Musk," he said with deliberate calm, "you may be a man of significant influence, but in my courtroom, that influence ends at the door." Gasps rippled through the room. Elon didn't flinch. His lead attorney, a silver-haired veteran of high-profile corporate litigation, stood and introduced the defense team. Judge Roberts remained silent, unimpressed. There would be no backroom deals or favors here. This wasn't Silicon Valley. This was a federal courtroom, and Judge Roberts intended to remind Musk and the world that even giants can fall if the law demands it. As the opening statements began, it was clear that the courtroom showdown was only beginning. But no one, absolutely no one, could have predicted how explosive it would get, or that by the end of it, Elon Musk would be escorted out by order of the very judge now glaring at him from the bench. And even more shocking, what Musk said right before he left the courtroom would leave everyone speechless. The courtroom shifted from silence to hushed murmurs as the prosecution rose, their expression unreadable but confident. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. What could possibly force a man like Elon Musk into a courtroom, let alone put him at risk of being removed by a federal judge? The lead prosecutor, a composed woman named Amelia Grant, approached the jury with quiet intensity. Her voice was calm, but every word she spoke cut through the courtroom like a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this case is not about innovation. It is not about success. It is about responsibility. It is about what happens when power, left unchecked, spirals into abuse." She gestured toward Musk without even looking at him. Mr. Musk is accused of deliberately manipulating the stock market using his platform and influence, not just through business strategies, but through public statements designed to trigger volatility for personal gain. Screens lit up around the courtroom as digital evidence appeared. Tweet after tweet was displayed, some cryptic, some bold, all posted by Musk during critical financial windows. One tweet in particular stood out. "Thinking of taking Tesla private at $420. Funding secured." The courtroom had seen it before. But today, it was more than just controversial. It was part of the case. "On the surface, it looks like a joke," Grant said, pointing to the tweet. But billions of dollars moved that day. Investors lost millions. Some made fortunes. And Mr. Musk? He watched it unfold, knowing full well the chaos he had just created. She then introduced internal emails from Tesla employees, expressing confusion and concern after Musk's tweets. Some suggested they weren't even aware of such plans. Others feared legal consequences. The emails were laced with panic, and that panic was now evidence. But the allegations didn't stop at market manipulation. There were whispers, now given voice, about Musk's interactions with government officials, pushing policy discussions toward his company's benefits. There were notes, meetings without full transparency, and texts suggesting an influence campaign hidden under layers of charm and disruption. Judge Roberts occasionally raised his eyebrows, but mostly remained stone-faced. Still, the weight of the evidence was undeniable. Musk sat still, eyes slightly narrowed, scanning every detail presented. Then came the bombshell, the allegation that Musk had used confidential research data from one of his lesser-known subsidiaries to influence decisions at SpaceX, decisions that could affect national security partnerships. It was still under investigation, but its mere mention sent shockwaves through the courtroom. The jury members glanced at each other, some already showing signs of concern. The public outside the courthouse was now roaring. News was leaking faster than it could be processed. The prosecution concluded, "This is not a case about punishing success. This is about protecting integrity. No one, no matter how brilliant, how wealthy, how revered, is above the law." The silence that followed was heavier than anything that came before it. Elon Musk slowly looked up, not at the judge, not at the jury, but straight at Amelia Grant. And in that quiet stare, a storm was brewing. As soon as the prosecution rested, murmurs echoed through the courtroom like ripples after a stone hits water. All eyes turned at Elon Musk. The room tensed with anticipation. Would he remain silent behind his legal team, or would the world's most enigmatic tech titan speak for himself? To everyone's surprise, including his attorneys, Musk stood up. Judge Roberts raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Musk, you wish to speak?" "I do, Your Honor." With the court's permission, Musk said, his voice calm but thunderous in impact. The judge allowed it, a rare move, especially in a high-profile case where every word could shift public opinion like a landslide. Musk stepped forward, unshackled by paper or screen, and looked straight at the jury. "I'm not a saint," he began, "but I'm not a villain either." The courtroom froze. Yes, I made bold statements. Some were jokes, some were hopeful dreams, but they were never lies with intent to deceive. They were born from a place of risk, vision, and sometimes desperation to shake up stagnation. He paused, letting the words settle. "I tweet like I think, spontaneously, recklessly, sometimes foolishly. But in a world where CEOs hide behind PR firms and legal filters, I chose transparency. I chose to speak directly to the people, to investors, to dreamers." People in the back rows leaned forward, captivated. "I am guilty of dreaming too big," he continued, voice rising, "of believing that one man, one team, one company could push humanity forward. Yes, I disrupted markets, but not for greed, for progress." He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, if this court is punishing audacity, then I stand guilty. But if it's seeking criminal intent, manipulation, or abuse of power, then I stand misunderstood." His attorney finally rose to assist, supporting Musk's legal counterpoints. They methodically refuted the claims one by one. The infamous funding-secured tweet, backed by internal discussions with international investors, perhaps premature, but not fabricated. The internal Tesla emails, contextual, expressing doubt, but not denial of the proposal. The alleged misuse of national data, completely unfounded. No official source confirmed it as breach-worthy. The defense's tone shifted the atmosphere. A tech analyst in a crowd, Liv tweeted, "Musk just turned the courtroom into a TED Talk." Outside the courthouse, crowds grew. Protesters held signs that read, "Free the future," and "You can't jail innovation." Others chanted, "Accountability for all." The streets became a battleground of ideals. Back inside, Judge Roberts remained neutral, but even he couldn't deny the charisma Musk brought into the room. The defense rested with the air thick in tension. Then came the unexpected moment. Musk turned to the public gallery and said, "I may be on trial, but so is the idea that boldness should be punished." A gasp spread across the courtroom. Musk sat down, folding his hands. The courtroom was no longer just a stage for legal arguments. It had become a theater of ideology, where law met ambition, and justice would have to choose between order and vision. The silence in the courtroom was deafening after Musk's passionate words. Judge Roberts, a man known for his stoic demeanor and meticulous judgment, seemed slightly shaken by the tech mobile's defense. His hands rested on the sides of his chair as he took in Musk's remarks. It was rare for someone like Roberts to be moved by a defendant's rhetoric. But here was Musk, a billionaire with an unyielding belief in his own vision, challenging everything Roberts had ever stood for in the judicial system. While the judge remained motionless, his mind raced. He had seen the likes of CEOs, politicians, and billionaires come and go, but Musk was different. He wasn't just a wealthy individual playing the game of corporate law. He was a disruptive force, a visionary who had shattered the status quo, and now he was asking for forgiveness in a courtroom for that very thing. Could a judge be swayed by passion, charisma, and an unshakable belief in one's own purpose? Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy intensified. News vans lined the street, and journalists eagerly awaited each new development. Musk's defense had become the talk of every news outlet. Analysts debated the implications of his words. some calling it a masterstroke of public relations, others criticizing him for trying to manipulate public sentiment. But amid the chaos, there were whispers of admiration. Musk's approach was unorthodox, but it had captivated the imagination of millions. The courtroom became an extension of the public stage, a place where business, politics, and law collided in a spectacular, unpredictable display. Social media exploded with hashtags like #MuskForFreedom and #DisruptTheCourt, while others took to forums to argue the legitimacy of his actions. Was he a visionary trying to break free from a corrupt system, or a reckless billionaire who had gone too far? Back in the courtroom, Judge Roberts looked up from his notes, briefly meeting Musk's gaze. It wasn't just about the law anymore, it was about legacy. The decision he made could influence how future generations of tech entrepreneurs, innovators, and dreamers were treated by the justice system. For the first time, Roberts' usual calm seemed to falter, his mind divided between the rule of law and the reality of Musk's position. The courtroom had been transformed into an ideological battlefield where the old guard of the legal system was being challenged by a man who embodied the new era of technology and ambition. The prosecution was quick to counter Musk's impassioned defense, reiterating the severity of his actions. The claim was simple. Musk had deliberately misled investors, manipulated stock prices, and jeopardized the economy, all for personal gain. His tweets were not just spontaneous thoughts. They were deliberate and reckless moves that shook the very foundation of the financial system. But the media storm outside was hard to ignore. The hashtag Elon trial was trending worldwide. Celebrities, influencers, and even former employees of Musk's companies were voicing their opinions on the matter. Some took Musk's side, arguing that his boldness was precisely what the world needed. Others criticized his lack of accountability, claiming that no one should be above the law, regardless of their vision. Inside the courtroom, Judge Roberts began to feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. He wasn't just judging a man. He was deciding the future of what it meant to be a disruptive force in modern society. Could a man like Musk, with his unchecked ambition and unconventional methods, ever truly fit within the confines of the law? The day of the final verdict had arrived. The courtroom was filled with an air of anticipation that felt heavier than ever before. As Judge Roberts entered, the room fell silent, with everyone eager to hear the outcome of the trial that had captivated the world's attention for weeks. The stakes were higher than ever. A multi-billion-dollar empire was on the line, but so too was the future of how society would view and regulate the actions of the world's wealthiest individuals. Musk sat at the defendant's table, his face a mask of calmness. Despite the storm of criticism, protests, and mounting pressure, he had remained unwavering. His defense team had painted him as a misunderstood innovator, someone who had simply pushed the limits of what was possible, even at the expense of legality. His supporters, the ones who saw him as a champion of progress, continued to rally behind him, holding their breath for the final decision. Judge Roberts, with a stern expression, prepared to speak. After careful consideration of all the evidence, testimonies, and arguments presented, this court finds Elon Musk guilty of financial manipulation, insider trading, and other related charges. A gasp echoed through the courtroom. Musk's supporters were stunned, while the opposition let out collective sighs of relief. It seemed as though justice had been served, but the verdict was not as clear-cut as they thought. As the judge continued, his tone shifted. However, given the extraordinary circumstances, the impact of Musk's technological innovations, and his charitable efforts towards space exploration and clean energy, the court hereby imposes a sentence of probation rather than incarceration. The room was still, as if everyone were trying to process the full implications of what had just been said. A multi-billion-dollar fortune, groundbreaking technologies, and a legacy that would be remembered for centuries. All of it now hung on a thread. Musk's expression remained unreadable. He knew the legal battle wasn't over. He had avoided prison time, but his reputation had been severely tarnished, and the consequences of this trial would likely follow him for the rest of his life. But something else was brewing. Just as Judge Roberts was about to adjourn the case, a new development occurred that no one could have predicted. The courtroom doors burst open, and a young woman, unidentified by the public until this moment, walked in. She had been an anonymous whistleblower, someone who had worked closely with Musk companies and had firsthand knowledge of internal operations. "I have new evidence," she said, her voice steady but charged with emotion. The room fell silent again. All eyes turned to her. She pulled out a stack of documents, handing them over to the judge. The courtroom was now engulfed in another wave of uncertainty. What did this new evidence reveal? Was it going to change everything? Judge Roberts hesitated, looking at the papers with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Musk's defense team reacted quickly, but it was clear that this unexpected twist could unravel everything they had fought for in the trial. The room buzzed with the energy of the unknown, and no one knew where this new turn of events would take them. Would it exonerate Musk, or would it bring even more devastating revelations to light? The final moments of the trial were about to unfold in a way no one could have imagined. The courtroom was at the edge of a precipice, ready to plunge into a new chapter of intrigue, secrets, and revelations. What was in those documents? And would Musk be able to continue his journey, or was this just the beginning of his downfall? The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted from tense anticipation to a chaotic whirlwind of confusion. Everyone in the room, from the defense attorneys to the prosecutors, was now focused on a young woman who had just walked in with the bombshell evidence. The silence that followed her entrance was deafening, as if the world itself had paused to absorb what was about to unfold. The documents she presented could change everything, the entire course of the trial, and possibly even the trajectory of Elon Musk's future. Judge Roberts, looking more bewildered than ever, scanned the papers in his hands. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by an edge of uncertainty. The defense team quickly huddled together, whispering urgently among themselves. They knew that this new evidence could either clear Musk of all charges or bury him deeper into legal jeopardy than anyone had anticipated. Musk's legal team immediately tried to dismiss the documents, claiming they were irrelevant or tampered with. But the judge, after a long pause, overruled them. These will be reviewed, and we will adjourn briefly for the prosecution and defense to examine these files in detail. As the judge's gavel echoed in the courtroom, the murmurs of speculation began. The young woman, who had been hiding in the shadows until this moment, stepped forward to explain her involvement. She was a former employee of Musk Companies, a brilliant data scientist who had worked closely on the development of Musk's most ambitious projects. She had stayed silent throughout the trial, but now, something had compelled her to speak out. I worked for Musk Companies for several years, during which I gained access to sensitive data and internal communications that raised serious concerns, she said, her voice unwavering despite the enormity of the moment. What I found could change everything you think you know about this case. The prosecutor, already anticipating what this might mean, leaned forward. What exactly is in these documents? With a sense of gravity, the young woman revealed that she had uncovered evidence suggesting that several of Musk's high-profile innovations, including some of the most publicized product launches and tech investments, were not as groundbreaking as they had appeared. In fact, many of the key patents and technologies Musk companies had patented were based on ideas and research that had been secretly copied or stolen from other companies and individuals. Furthermore, she claimed that Musk had knowingly manipulated market values through insider trading tactics, using privileged information to make decisions that benefited him and his companies while leaving thousands of smaller investors at a disadvantage. The revelations were staggering. This was no longer just a case of financial mismanagement or illegal deals. This was a systemic manipulation of the market and the tech world at large. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Everyone was on edge, unable to comprehend the scale of what had just been revealed. Musk, who had been so confident just moments earlier, now sat motionless, his gaze fixed on the floor. His defense team scrambled to prepare a response, but it was clear that this new development would challenge everything they had built over the course of the trial. As the judge reviewed the documents, the weight of the moment became evident. The future of Musk's empire was now in serious jeopardy, and a world watched with bated breath as this unprecedented twist in the case unfolded. Would these bombshell revelations lead to the end of Musk's career, or would he somehow manage to escape unscathed once again? The courtroom was in turmoil, and the fate of one of the world's most powerful men was hanging by a thread. The courtroom buzzed with hushed conversations, a mixture of disbelief, shock, and curiosity filling the air. The revelation of the bombshell evidence had sent shockwaves through every corner of the legal world. But now, the moment of truth had arrived. The judge, his face pale and contemplative, raised his gavel once more, silencing the room. "We will now proceed to close statements," Judge Roberts announced, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. But even his calm exterior couldn't hide the intensity of what had just transpired. This case, once thought to be straightforward, had turned into one of the most complex and high-profile trials of the decade. Musk's defense team was visibly rattled. The powerful revelations made by the young whistleblower had created a crack in their airtight defense. They tried desperately to discredit the new evidence, claiming it was fabricated or the work of a disgruntled former employee. But despite their best efforts, the cracks in their argument were becoming too evident to ignore. The prosecutor, now emboldened by the new evidence, delivered a closing statement that struck at the heart of the case. The evidence presented today is not just circumstantial, it's damning. What we have learned is that Elon Musk, a man who has been idolized by millions, may have built his empire on deception, manipulation, and the exploitation of others. It is time for the truth to be heard, and for the world to see Musk for what he truly is. Musk, who had been sitting in his seat, looking as though he had aged a decade in mere hours, finally spoke up. His voice was hoarse, his once confident tone now faltering. "This is a setup," he declared, his eyes flashing with the familiar arrogance that had made him a tech billionaire. "I built everything from the ground up. These accusations are false, and I'll fight them with everything I have." But the damage had already been done. As the prosecutor continued, the weight of the evidence was undeniable. The jury, who had once been divided on their views of Musk, now found themselves leaning toward the overwhelming case presented before them. The world watched as this monumental trial approached its final moments. The jury deliberated for what seemed like an eternity. When they returned, the verdict was swift and unequivocal. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud, insider trading, and intellectual property theft. The courtroom erupted into chaos as the judge declared the sentence. Elon Musk's once glittering empire was crumbling before his eyes. The trial had not only exposed his legal violations, but it also revealed the cracks in the public image he had carefully constructed. From tech mogul to convicted felon in one swift motion, Musk's career seemed irreparably tarnished. In the aftermath, the media couldn't get enough of the story. Headlines screamed, "Elon Musk's fall from grace," while social media exploded with reactions from fans and critics alike. Was this the end of Musk's dominance in the tech world? Would he be able to rebuild his reputation or face the consequences of his actions? As for the young whistleblower, her actions had made her a hero to some and a target to others. Her decision to speak out had forever changed the course of this trial, and perhaps even the future of the tech industry. But one thing was certain. The consequences of this trial would reverberate for years to come, altering the lives of everyone involved. The fall of Elon Musk was not just the downfall of a billionaire, but a cautionary tale for anyone who believed they were beyond the reach of the law.